Okay, it looks like we're live. So hi, everybody out there in Facebook and in other places where you can watch this. We're here today. My name is Judy Amabile, and I'm a candidate for the Colorado State House in District 13. And I'm here today with Karen Middleton, who is the president of Cobalt, which is an organization that advocates for women's reproductive rights, and with Dr. Warren Hern, who is the director of the Boulder Abortion Clinic, which is his private medical practice. And we're here today to talk about ballot measure 115. We're also going to talk a little bit about what would happen if Roe v. Wade were overturned, and what are some of the things we can do here in Colorado that would bolster us against national change in our fortunes nationally with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and what kind of legislation could we be proposing now so that women in our state still have access to reproductive rights, abortion care, and making their own choices. So let's start by having both Dr. Hern and Karen Middleton introduce themselves and talk a little bit about why they're here. And I guess maybe let's start with you, Karen.
Great, thank you so much. Appreciate you inviting me. Cobalt works to support access to abortion care and reproductive rights. And we have been kept quite busy this summer as one of the executive committee members for the Vote No on 115 campaign. So we work collaboratively with 7 organizations: ACLU, CALOR, Planned Parenthood, Progress Now, and the Interfaith Alliance, and New Era Colorado. And so we're working, sorry about that, we're working with them collectively to help defeat this measure. And I'll turn it to Dr. Hern. I'll make that call go away.
Thank you, Karen. And Judy, thank you for inviting me to participate in this program. Appreciate it very much. And I hope we have an opportunity to communicate with people who are listening about some of these issues. So first of all, let me just say I started performing abortions in Colorado full-time in 1973, 47 years ago, when I helped open the first nonprofit abortion clinic in Colorado. And then a year later, opened my own private practice in 1975 as an outpatient abortion clinic, specializing in outpatient abortion services. So I've been doing that all this time. Over the years, I've developed numerous techniques and procedures and instruments, ways of doing abortions further along in pregnancy safely, because I had more and more requests of that from women. And there were more and more medical emergencies that really required interrupting the pregnancy and getting the woman's uterus empty for her to survive. And we've had many instances of that, most of which have happened after 22 weeks. It is very often the case that these medical problems and problems of fetal abnormality are not evident until after 22 weeks, which is one of the worst things about the proposal of 115, which would make abortion illegal after 22 weeks. That directly affects my patients who come from Colorado, but already from all over the country for the help, because they can't get this help in other places. So this is really a terrible proposition. There is no exception for the health of the woman. They say you can do it to save a woman's life, but the language is so vague, you can't tell how close the woman has to be to dying before you can actually help her, which is terrible. That puts the doctor in an impossible position. No exceptions for fetal abnormality, no exceptions for rape, no exception for incest. So this is many, many complicated situations that we would not be able to help women if this ballot proposal passes. So I think that I appreciate you giving us a chance to talk about that, and I can answer any questions I'll try to answer any questions you have.
Okay, great. So Karen, maybe you could start by telling us what the ballot measure seeks to do, and why that's problematic for women in Colorado and for all over the country and really other places too.
Absolutely. So for the fourth time since 2008, Colorado voters are faced with yet another abortion ban. So this isn't the first time. And what I'm always reminding myself is that there are a lot of people that moved to Colorado since we saw this flurry of bans. So laying that groundwork is really helpful. Colorado has historically rejected these abortion bans, and it's always been on a bipartisan basis. So Democrats, Republicans, and unaffiliated voters have really rejected these time and time again. So in 2008, we defeated the first personhood ban in that set by 73%. We saw a slightly different version in 2010, defeated it by 71%. In 2012, they tried and failed to get enough signatures. And in 2014, No 67, which was written in a misleading way, was defeated by 67%. We saw a nice 6-year gap, but we will also say that, Colorado voters have said time and time again that abortion access is a fundamental right, and it's something that they do not believe government should be interfering with. And that's been the basis of a message that's continued through some of these earlier abortion measures. So let me just get to the specific language about what it does. Hang on one sec. So it does, first of all, it's written in a very complicated way. So readers are reading it and they're not sure what it means. The second really dangerous part of this is that there are no exceptions. So no exceptions for rape and incest, no exceptions for health of the mother, no exceptions if there is a lethal fetal anomaly. And that no exceptions is really problematic. And we've had a number of doctors speaking out about this because they say exceptions for life of the mother, but that is imminent. That is not, I have cancer, I need to take treatment and not wait 4 months. So it's very damaging and dangerous for the people who are impacted. And every pregnancy is unique. So we like to really level set by saying, 1, don't be misled by what it says. 2, there are no exceptions, which make this a very extreme ban. And 3, every pregnancy is unique. And so trying to judge what one pregnancy may or may not do is really problematic for anyone who might be needing to access this kind of care.
Yeah. So Dr. Hern, can you give us some examples of women that have come to your clinic looking for care later in their pregnancy, and why they're there, and what their likely outcomes would have been had they not been able to receive your services?
Well, one example that we can talk about, for which there is an easy reference for people who want to read more about it, is a patient named Leah Huff, who had an article in the Denver Post a week ago Sunday, in which she talked about her situation, and she was in Iowa, where she had herself a very severe problem with intracranial pressure, which could cause her to go blind if she continued the pregnancy. She wanted desperately to have a child, and she was pregnant. And so she was then faced with the dilemma of this impending catastrophic problem for her, and discovered that the fetus had severe abnormalities that was not consistent with survival. And so, but she had to wait until in her state to determine that the fetus is no longer viable, to make the decision to whether to end the pregnancy. And by the time they got to that point in Iowa, they couldn't help her, and they said, "There's no way you can do this." So she wound up coming to my office, and we took care of her, and she survived. And obviously, this was a very difficult and anguishing situation for her. We have the thousands of these kind of examples. We have recently a woman who came with her husband. They were extremely happy to have a pregnancy with twins, with identical twins, but it turns out that the twins had a twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. We've seen numerous instances of this, and this can be a fatal for certainly one and perhaps both twins, and it's a catastrophic problem. And sometimes an intervention can help them save one twin, but in this case it didn't. Not only did the intervention cause one of the twins to die in utero, but then the other one died. And so this pregnancy then became a threat to her life. When you have a dead fetus in the uterus, in the old days, they would wait because they weren't going to do an abortion. They couldn't do that. And many women died because of that kind of situation with an impending stillbirth. So there's an example where we were able to take care of her and end the pregnancy, get her uterus empty, and she was able to go on. And we hope, obviously, that she can have a healthy pregnancy in the future and have the child that she wants. So those are two examples that are recent. There are many, many examples. And I think that, you know, these women don't come to my office because they want to have an abortion. They want to have a baby, but they're ending the pregnancy because it's medically necessary, either for their health or for the fact that they have a fetus that can't survive or will have in terminal suffering. And so that's a very private family decision that can't be made at the ballot box by thousands of people who know anything about it, much less legislators. So my point is that no woman's life should be at the mercy of the next election, much less of Mitch McConnell.
I have to agree with you there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead, Karen.
Well, and I was just going to say, one of the fundamental statements that we talk about at the campaign is that decisions around pregnancy are best made by a woman and her family in consultation with her doctors in accordance with her faith and not by politicians. And Dr. Hern just gave you a couple of very concrete examples, and there are others. There are patient stories and patients coming forward from all over the country. And I just want, folks that are tuning in today to take a look at that. There's a site called patientforward.org that shares a lot of these stories, and they're heartbreaking, and each story is unique. And the idea that if you ever asked me to come in between a woman and her doctor around these, I would never think that, I don't have all the information, right? So why do we think putting this to the ballot box makes any sense at all? So I just wanted to emphasize that point. Thank you.
A fundamental issue, and I agree with everything that Karen just said, the fundamental issue is that many political leaders, religious leaders, and others simply do not understand that abortion is health care, that this is a fundamental, a fundamental component of women's health care, that pregnancy is not a benign condition. Women die from being pregnant. If they want to be pregnant and have a baby, fantastic. They should have the best medical care they can have to ensure their survival to the end of the pregnancy and have a healthy baby. Wonderful. If the patient doesn't want to be pregnant, or if she has important medical reasons for ending the pregnancy, there should be no obstacle. There is no justification for any restriction on this treatment. And it's a vital kind of treatment. So that, and as Karen said, only the woman with her physician and her partner or family can make that decision. This is not a matter of public decision. This is a private matter.
I wonder if women who are forced to carry an unviable pregnancy or one that's harmful to their health to term, do they risk the ability to have a child in the future?
Yes.
Sometimes?
Yeah.
So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Let's just put it this way. There are instances, first of all, if the fetus has died in utero, if there's a spontaneous death, then that woman's life's in danger because she can develop what we call a disseminated intravascular coagulation syndrome, DIC, which disrupts the clotting. She can bleed to death. She can die from that. There are many other aspects of that, but there are instances in which, for example, a very clear example, a very dramatic example of what a kind of thing was a woman who came to me sent by her doctor in northern Colorado, because she had a catastrophic genetic abnormality. If I remember correctly, it was trisomy 13. But in any case, this carries with it the high risk of various other complications of pregnancy, aside from simply being fatal for the fetus. And when she got to my office, she was feeling not so well. And very soon after she got there, as we were getting ready to start her treatment, she started developing the high blood pressure, the malignant high blood pressure, which is a characteristic of that particular condition. By 3 o'clock in the morning, I had to operate on her in the hospital operating room, with the chief of the service looking over my shoulder with the instruments that I designed, because they didn't have these in the hospital. I had to operate on her at 3 o'clock in the morning. And if I hadn't, she would have been dead by the morning. And she still had to go to the intensive care unit with the nearly fatal effects of this condition. So there's an example. You can't consult with the lawyers and legislators, or the public about a decision like that. That's an emergency. And so I think that those are the kinds of problems that this proposition would interfere with if it becomes law.
And I think what Dr. Hern is describing are conditions that when it's part of reproductive health care, it is part of the decision making that you are doing and not what anyone else should be doing. There are people who are able to successfully, they make a decision that they will try to carry the pregnancy to term knowing it won't be successful. They have the opportunity to do that if there is not a medical condition that prevents them from doing so and letting it play out. And that is one of the arguments you'll see from the other side is somehow you should just be a fetal hospice. That is a devastating emotional experience for some people who feel like they couldn't handle it if they had to continue the pregnancy, knowing that pregnancy is not surviving, that baby won't make it. And that is what is so toxic about the framing of this by the opposition is that, I talked to a woman a few weeks ago who said her friend was forced to carry a pregnancy to term, that she knew the baby was going to die, and she was devastated. She did not have the choice to decide which way she wanted to go, and it changed her forever. So the emotional consequences on anyone who's lost a pregnancy that they wanted, whether they were able to terminate or not, they have to make those decisions for themselves. If it is forced on them, they often feel quite badly, and again, not something that you want to be in the middle of, right? They need to make that decision for themselves, not asking someone to make a blanket pronouncement.
So let's talk for a minute about what can people do to help the No on 115 campaign, because my understanding is that it's actually a pretty close race right now. And so it seems like we really need to support all of the efforts that are being made to defeat this ballot measure.
Absolutely. So there's a few ways you can help. The first way is lending your personal endorsement. You can lend your name yourself or as an organization, and you can go to the voteno115.com website and do that right there. In addition to that, we are, I think, sharing your personal stories, sharing articles, sharing endorsements with detailed information from trusted sources. Dr. Hern has written, there are a number of both patient and practitioner stories that are out there. Sharing that with your personal networks and telling your friends and neighbors why you oppose this ballot measure, what it means to you, getting out a yard sign if you want, which you can also get on the campaign, volunteering your time. We are having phone banking and text banking practically every day at this point, and you can sign up for those opportunities on our website. And of course, you can always donate money, again, through the website is the best way. So it's time, people, and money, as with any campaign. But I do think the power of personal stories and the power of anything that's been in the media or is on social media, there are very good stories that explain to people the complexities of what we're dealing with and why a one-size-fits-all ban does not work in something as delicate as managing pregnancy.
Okay, that's great. And hopefully people out there who are listening will do that. And I think we're going to post on Facebook the website you can go to sign up and be an endorser and donate and get involved. So let's talk a little bit about what's happening at the Supreme Court right now. And Dr. Hern, I understand you had a little bit of involvement when the Roe v. Wade decision was made. And I wonder if you could just tell us, what did Roe v. Wade do? And what is at stake if it is undone?
Yes, and in 1970, I began working for the federal government as chief of a branch in the OEO Family Planning Program, which was set up to help poor women have access to birth control. And so I was in Washington, D.C. I got to know the various people throughout the country who were working to liberalize the abortion laws and to make these changes. So I was fortunate to be in the Supreme Court chamber in December of 1971 when Sarah Weddington argued the Roe versus Wade decision case for the first time. Margie Fitz-Ames was arguing the companion case, Doe v. Bolton. And so I was very fortunate to be able to be there for that. And in fact, we had coffee at the next table to the Chief Justice and Harry Blackmun downstairs afterwards. But in any case, I've been close to this and following it. I learned how to do early abortions in Washington, D.C. at that time, and I followed it. I wasn't planning to do this as a clinical activity because I'm trained in public health and epidemiology, and that was my purpose. But increasingly, I became involved, and that's a long story. But I have watched these legal changes throughout. Roe versus Wade came down then in January of 1973, and it basically said three things. One, in the first trimester of pregnancy, set up by this schedule set by Harry Blackmun, that the state may not interfere with a woman's right to choose. That this is between the woman and her physician. In the second trimester, the state may make reasonable regulation, protect the woman's health, such as requiring it to be done in the hospital. This is before we developed the techniques for doing it safely outside the hospital. But it said that the state has to show a compelling reason for interfering with a woman's right to have a safe abortion. And in the third trimester, the state may outlaw abortion. Well, fast forward to 1992 in the Casey decision, Sandra Day O'Connor, who is sometimes presented as some kind of a pro-choice advocate, gutted the Roe versus Wade decision by changing the requirement from the state had to show a compelling interest in preventing the woman to have access to abortion to that the woman has to show that she has experiencing an undue burden by the state's regulation, which put the onus on the woman and not on the state. A very, very fundamental change. And that decision and others have led to numerous mischievous problems, many laws, thousands of laws across the country restricting different aspects of abortion. We now have a situation where the radical Christian right and the radical political right has been working for 45 years to get control of the Supreme Court and the federal judiciary because they know they can't win a fair election. So they take over the courts, and that is the main reason why the evangelicals have supported Trump at a 81%, even though he is the antithesis of what they represent, because he promised that he would put anti-abortion judges on the Supreme Court, which has its own utility for them. And that now we're watching Mitch McConnell ram through this appointment of Amy Coney Barrett, who has very many issues as a judge, and is clearly on record as being opposed to Roe versus Wade. And the Federalist Society has certified that she will vote against Roe versus Wade, but she is now being used as a puppet by Trump to put on the court in advance of the election. So in case he loses, which he probably will, then he can dispute the election and get her to help legitimize his continuation in power. So that's one of the problems behind this appointment. She is also on record as being against the Affordable Care Act. And so we now have the prospect of a heavily radical conservative majority on Supreme Court, 6-3, which will give the radical right, the radical political right, the Christian conservatives, and the economic radicals the control of the Supreme Court that they want. So that is a problem. In the process, Roe versus Wade is likely to be overturned, but even if they decide to avoid the political consequences of that, they can gut all the Roe versus Wade decision and support all these various measures at the state level that make it impossible to offer abortion services. So that's my short answer to a very important question.
Okay. So I think what I hear you saying is that if Roe v. Wade is struck down, it's not going to actually have that big of an effect because the states are already doing this.
That's not what I'm saying. I think that Roe versus Wade has been destroyed in many ways.
Yep.
But it still stands, and it's an important symbol of a woman's right to choose.
Okay.
And it still prevails in many instances. But there are certain states that have trigger laws that if Roe versus Wade is overturned, automatically those laws go into effect. Karen certainly knows more about that than I do.
Yeah, I was just going to offer that we have we have two things sort of colliding right now. One is that in terms of issue intensity, you know, as Dr. Hern pointed out, there has been this push to try to take back the courts, which unfortunately is going to be the legacy of this current presidential administration, which we all are crossing everything and then working really hard to confirm that it's a one term. But the damage that's been done in terms of the legacy of federal courts and the Supreme Court is vast. And what we are facing is, so as you move toward being in the state legislature, when I was a legislator in 2008, 9, and 10, in each of those sessions, we might have seen one, maybe two anti-choice bills. It was not that big a deal. But what we have been seeing across the country, and a good resource, there are two good resources that I would recommend to listeners. One is the Guttmacher Institute actually tracks the number of state laws that have been attempted and passed to restrict access to abortion. So there's a national organization called Americans United for Life that made its key role was incremental dismantling of access to abortion using stair-step state laws, and you saw hundreds and hundreds, I think it's over 400 anti-abortion laws have been passed at the state level since they made their push, which began in about 2011. And so you see not just trigger laws, but trap laws, targeted regulation of abortion providers. And in 2019, you saw it was like every conservative legislator in the country that had gotten their anti-choice model bill introduced decided it was a really good time, and more extreme. So you saw a 6-week ban, 8-week ban, 12-week ban, also all sorts of things. Life begins at conception bills. They became really common, and a number of state legislatures passed these bills. They have an Abortion Reversal Information Act that says if you're accessing a medication abortion, which is 2 different pills within 24 hours, and you somehow change your mind in the middle, you can be read this statement about how you might be able to save that pregnancy. It's actually medically inaccurate. It's false information, and state legislatures have been eating this up. So when Roe is further dismantled, you're dealing with a state landscape that includes nearly a decade of terrible anti-abortion bills, lots of them getting through, and lots of them getting through in little incremental ways. And then you have a whole bunch like that set in 2019 that are all being challenged as unconstitutional. So they're moving through the court system now. So the double impact of not just an unfavorable Supreme Court, but unfavorable other federal courts around the country are really going to have a long-standing impact. So the fight really comes back to the states. So the good news is that Colorado has been strongly advocating for reproductive rights. We have pro-choice majorities in both chambers and in the governor's office, and we're going to need those more than ever. So that is our insulation against it at the moment, but states all around us could lose access to abortion because of those trigger laws that Dr. Hern mentioned. And we're seeing bans all the time. In the last year to 2 years, Utah passed an 18-week ban, for example. So if you run into a pregnancy complication in Utah, you're very often coming to Colorado now, just to give you a local example.
Yeah. So what?
Let me just add this to reinforce something which surely we all here know, but Karen mentioned that our protection, our salvation at this point is the state legislature. That we cannot depend on the federal courts anymore. Because of what the Trump has done, as to pack the federal courts with inferior, in many cases, and very extremely radical conservative judges that will not support us. The controlling the state government is critical in maintaining access to safe abortion services for women.
Well, and I just add on top of that, the role of the federal elected officials becomes that much more important. Flipping the Senate is really ground zero for seeing if we can get some protective legislation done in Congress. So good news is that the pro-choice caucus, co-chaired by our own Diana DeGette and Barbara Lee out of California, have been building, and they actually have been strengthening, and they see more pro-choice members of Congress than they have seen at any other point in Congress's history. And Judy, to reintroduce the Women's Health Protection Act, which goes a fair way to protect access to abortion care, but doesn't do enough to, we can't break down all of the barriers established at the state levels, but we can go a long way with by flipping the Senate and having a Senate and a president that would help lift up measures that we're seeing in Congress.
So is it possible for Colorado to run sort of a counter ballot measure that would change our state constitution to say that, you know, to put back what was originally gained with Roe, all these protections for women's reproductive rights?
So the challenge is that Roe has gestational limits, so it's not as good as Colorado in some ways. Colorado is neutral, right? We don't have protections and we don't have restrictions. So in fact, the most, yes, we would need to run a measure to overturn the Constitution, but our holy grail is to actually overturn the 1984 constitutional ban on state funding for abortions and affirming abortion access as a fundamental right in Colorado. But really, without flipping that funding ban, we still always have the unfortunate situation that if you qualify for state Medicaid and you're in an, you know, you don't have the income to help access care, that's exactly when state Medicaid does not support you, which makes no sense in this grand scheme of things. But that is really the piece that we have to undo. And the only way to undo it is through a ballot measure, which are expensive and timely, but something that we have to really look to. Now, it could be referred by the state legislators to the ballot, but a referred measure is a high bar in the legislature, so that maybe means we need even bigger majorities than we have now. So we'll just put that on your to-do list.
Okay. Go ahead, Warren.
This is just a follow-up on what Karen was saying. I was very much in the middle of this in 1984 when they had the ballot initiative to cut off funding, to change the Colorado Constitution to prohibit the U.S. Colorado funds from being used for abortion. And the week before the election, we were ahead. We lost by a few points, less than 1 percentage point, I think. And there's an interesting story behind that. We won't go into it. The pro-choice community decided 4 years later to challenge it. And they had enough people in the organization to take over the state, but they didn't get with all the names and addresses and contact information for all the people who signed the signature, the ballot. And so the campaign consisted of ads that were not very convincing, and not the retail politics of convincing the people at the doors. And so we lost that by a large margin. And so that illustrates the problem that Karen is just identifying, which is that winning a ballot issue to change the Constitution is a very tough uphill fight. It can be done, but I think that the experience in the 80s was very dismal. And I think that, but Karen is right. One of the things that has to happen is to overturn and to reverse the 1984 constitutional ban on public funding for abortion, which is one of the reasons they cannot officially teach abortion in the medical school.
And I just build on that to say that the corollary at the federal level is the Hyde Amendment. The Hyde Amendment and the Helms Amendment are restricting access for abortion care at the federal level, including military. And Helms is related to funding provided overseas and information there. In fact, under this current president, they have further restricted both the domestic gag rule and then gag rules where, for example, we are using US federal funding for relief in a certain area, maybe after a storm, and someone is assaulted there, is not able to access an abortion as part of their reproductive health care if they find themselves pregnant on other land. Military, it depends on what state they live in, whether they would be able to access care off base. So that those federal amendments are key, and there is a move to end Hyde or overturn Hyde that's very active. All Above All and some others nationally are leading a campaign around that. So our our constitutional ban needs to be overturned at the state level, but there are some federal acts as well that we're working to roll back, and hopefully we'll be able to do that in the next 4 to 8 years. I'm being hopeful.
That's very, very critical, because poor women are often the ones who are the most acute need of an abortion, the end of pregnancy that is ruining their lives and which is endangering their lives. And also in my office, we get often military personnel who cannot get help through the foreign forces, and it was people who fly from various parts of the world to come to my office to get help, which they cannot get anywhere else. And that's a terrible penalty for them. But I think that they're perfectly capable doctors in the military, but they can't do anything because of these restrictions.
And that's one thing that Cobalt offers is we have the Cobalt Abortion Fund. It's an independent fund that provides resources to any person seeking an abortion anywhere in the state of Colorado. We also serve the entire Planned Parenthood of the Rocky Mountain region. So that also would fund abortion care and clinics in New Mexico or Southern Nevada. And it is a no questions asked, no income limitations, and we can provide direct support for those people seeking care. That fund was started in the First Universalist Church in Denver when the constitutional funding ban went into place back in '84. And it continues to grow, and the need continues to grow, but it is not a replacement for sound public policy and a healthcare system that recognizes that abortion is part of healthcare and needs to be covered as such.
Yeah, it's like the Pentagon having to have a bake sale to pay for bombers.
Yeah.
I mean, what Karen is doing and what the voluntary charitable organization has done is absolutely critical to help the patients. But it should be, as Karen said, a matter of public policy to help women get this essential medical care.
Yeah, I mean, that's inequity at its finest or at its worst, that the people who need it the most can't afford to have it. And that has also repercussions for our whole society, because we're not taking care of the people who need the care.
Yep, that's indeed. Well, and just to really recognize that the reproductive health rights and justice movement, probably, in hindsight, there were things we should have done differently way back when. But I would say since about 2013, when the movement really as a whole did a sea shift, I am hoping that as voters learn about abortion later in pregnancy and better understand why this abortion ban is quite dangerous in Colorado, that we can build on all of this education, all of these stories, all of these people who have brought their own personal stories to the table to help push the agenda even further. Colorado is really a national leader in this area. And if you think about our LARC program, long-acting reversible contraception, it was started by private funds originally. It's moved into the state purview, and it really has helped us reduce unintended pregnancies, particularly among young people, and has allowed for long-acting reversible contraception to be a solution that in fact does lower the need for abortion and increases family planning across the board. So for folks that really want common sense solutions, Colorado has been ground zero. I would say we need to take that to the next level and be the place where access to safe, legal abortion when you need it and having it covered is really, I think, the next frontier that we all need to be working on together, and not just waste our energy on defeating one ballot measure and then stopping, right? We have to keep going from here.
Yep. Go ahead, Dr.
Yeah, just as a little side note, if you will, what Karen is giving an excellent description of the things that have happened in the last few decades. Not everyone watching this perhaps is aware of the fact that in 1967, Colorado passed the first abortion reform law in the United States, legalizing abortion. There were certain important restrictions, and that was sponsored by Dick Lamb, who was a freshman legislator at the time, and by Senator John Birmingham, a Republican, who got this through the legislative process, and it was signed into law by Republican Governor John Love, who was quite a wonderful person, very progressive. We don't see those kind of Republicans now in the state legislature. But in any case, we have had a series of exceptionally outstanding, fantastic political leaders such as Dick Lamb, Tim Worth, Pat Schroeder, and many others who have led the charge on this and have worked very assiduously to protect abortion rights in the legislature, in the United States Congress, and as the governor's office. And we know we have a governor who is a very pro-choice, and we had John Hickenlooper, who was running for the Senate, who was very pro-choice. And so I think that we have had wonderful political leadership. We've had our bumps in the road with the Republican governors and legislature, but in general, there's a very strong pro-choice tradition in Colorado to support the women's rights.
Yeah, and not just amongst the leaders, but also amongst the people who have voted against all of these previous abortion bans. So we really have to keep that spirit alive, and make sure that we don't go backwards with this latest abortion ban. So I think, do you guys have any closing remarks that you'd like to make? Because this has just been really great. I think people who are listening have learned a lot, and this will be available. You can listen to it later. We're going to put it up on our website, and maybe the No on 115 campaign would like to do that too. So people can go to my website, judyamabile.com, or noon118.com.
115.
115.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Vote no 115.com. No worries.
Vote yes on 118. No one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I would just say thank you. I think the more that we lift up the reality of this measure to as many different places as possible, and hearing friends and family, because I do think it's confusing. I think it's designed to confuse people. Folks conflate this issue with other things that they might know about, but they don't really understand unless they've heard a story or talked to someone. And I think that really makes a difference. So I just want to thank you for lifting this up using your website, your Facebook Live, and appreciate your support today.
You're welcome. You guys I know are in the trenches fighting the good fight, and we've got to do everything we can to support you.
I second that, Judy. We need you in the legislature. We need your other Democratic colleagues in the legislature who will support what we're doing. And I think that all I can say is that to again reinforce something that Karen said, the more people understand about this matter and how difficult this is for women, the more I think most people are inclined to support the woman's choice and her access to private medical care that will help her and to with her and in conjunction with her family and her physician. So, I mean, again, I would simply say in summary, safe abortion services are an essential, fundamental component of women's healthcare in the 20th century. We need to keep it that way. And I think that this ballot issue while it's a very difficult problem for us to have to deal with, it is also an opportunity to communicate with the public about the essential aspects of this and why it's very important for women's health and for the health of our society, for women to be able to have access to this care.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So, well, thank you guys both for all the work that you're doing and for coming here today to talk. And let's all put our collective will towards defeating this terrible ballot measure.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you
everybody.
again. Appreciate it.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.